Motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, the first thing up is approval of the February 27th open session minutes. Has everyone had a chance to look at those?
Yes.
Okay, I'll accept a motion.
Motion to accept February 27, 2019 minutes. Open session.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, next up is open session meeting minutes for March 27th. I did not have any corrections. Anyone else?
No. Motion to approve the March 27th open session minutes.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
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 Okay, and that brings us to policies for second review. And we'll begin with policy 4-3, student discipline.
Good morning. Thank you. This policy was before you all last committee meeting, and it went to the board. I've received no changes since that time, since it went to the board. And so we would ask that this go for approval at the May meeting.
Had just a couple of questions, very minor. I know this is around student discipline and behavior is most of the language on this, but I just wanted to ask a question. After reading this, it just made me question another thing. How do principals handle, so the behavior and everything is expected to maintain before school, during school, and after school, and during all school-sponsored activity and extracurricular. With that being said, what are our expectations around dress code before school, after school, and like sports banquets and different athletic events with our students attending those? Are they held to the same standard, you know, for there? Because
They should be. You know, the code of conduct leaves dress code. It states dress code, but it says refer to your school level dress code. And so each principal should be developing, and that's part of the expectation, is that they develop a dress code. They publish it to their students as part of their handbook. And then they should be holding students to that dress code the entire time that students are in, you know, within our purview, before school, after school, at school-sponsored
it
events.
seems like there's a discrepancy, like for students attending sports banquets, like awards, and coming to basketball games or football games on a Friday night or whatever. And I witnessed some sports banquets where I know it wouldn't meet dress code. They wouldn't be able to wear it during the school hours. So I was a little curious why students would be able to wear it after hours. And it just made me think about that when I read the red letters here.
Right. We can certainly follow up, especially with high school principals, about ensuring that they're, you know, following. Now, it may be a slightly different dress code for those events.
Oh, really? You can have a different dress code for?
They can. They can have different dress codes for different types of events, but they have to spell it all out as to what the expectations are, so the students are aware of it.
I know some parents have been made very uncomfortable at some sports banquets, awards nights, and so I thought it made me think about this when I read this language, because it says before school, during school, after school hours, and any school-sponsored activity or extracurricular activity, and so that's what made me think about that. I was just wondering if principals use the same policy towards that guideline.
I'll follow up with the high school principals.
Okay. And I was just curious, down at the very bottom, why the Jessica Lunsford Act was, could you just explain why that's being removed?
Yes, and it wasn't removed because we're not following anymore. It was just placed there's another
Somebody
policy that
else.
addresses it, so I was trying not to be duplicative.
Okay. Okay.
Because we're required to follow Jessica
Right.
Lunsford Act.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
so I don't know why I didn't ask it the last time we looked at it, but I thought, why are we removing it from here?
Yeah, because
I think I asked it last time.
Okay.
yeah,
Yep.
because the sex offender
I
related
had the
policy,
same
it's in the
question.
sex offender
Okay.
policy as
Right.
opposed to,
I had the same
it didn't really
question.
fit there.
Yep.
Okay, any other questions around 4-3, student discipline?
No.
And we can either do these one at a time or do them all as a group.
I would do
Do
them
it
all as a group. Yep.
Okay. So we'll go down to 4-3C, prohibition of gangs and gang activity.
Yes, this one came before you at the last committee meeting and then went to the board, and I've received no requests for changes. We would ask that this go to the board also at the May meeting for approval.
Does anyone have any questions or comments?
Nope. Four -9.
Okay. We will move now to policy 4-9, investigation of school personnel.
This is similar, came before you all, went to the board for review, and I've received no requests for revision since it went to the board. We would ask that this go to the board for approval at the May meeting.
I just had one quick question in reading over this a second time. It is not required, because I get this question a lot, so we might as well talk about it on open camera. Our students, for the most part, are minors. Our parents do not have to be contacted or give permission for a search, or before a search is done. Like, what is our policy around that?
It depends. In searches that are conducted by school staff, we need reasonable suspicion that the child has violated a law or board policy.
Right.
And we are authorized to search. Now, parents are not.
Without calling the parent first?
Correct.
Okay,
Correct.
because parents do ask that question a lot.
Correct. And similarly with law enforcement, if it reaches to their level, probable cause, then they are authorized to search.
What if we're searching for, say, a weapon and we find drugs? How does that happen?
Well, if we're searching and it's within, a search has to be reasonable in scope and at the inception. So at the inception, we need to have that reasonable suspicion. And if we have that, and then if we're searching in an area which could find what we're looking for example, if we believe there is a weapon and we are looking in places that are the size to hold a weapon and we find something else, that's okay. If we're looking for something huge and look in a little small space, it's probably not reasonable in scope. So the fact that we find something else, as long as we're okay where we're searching, that's fine.
I'm not sure what page number this is, but it's number 5, pat down searches. I read this and I kind of had a question, but then when I read number 6, it clarified it for me. So under number 5, where it says searches must be conducted in private by a school official of the same gender with an adult witness present.
Yes.
And I thought, well, then I got to number 6 and it said conducted in private by a school official of the same gender with an adult witness of the same gender present. And I just wondered if we wanted to have that same language under number 5 to add school official of the same gender with an adult witness of the same gender present.
We didn't have it in the pat down because that's not very intrusive. There's nothing, you're just touching the exterior. You're not showing anything that might be more personal where you'd only want women if it was a girl, men if it was a boy. We can, it's not an issue. We just didn't because sometimes it's hard to gather same gender folks in an emergency, and since that's not so intrusive.
Okay.
But that's up to the board.
Right. Well, when I saw it in 6 and not 5, I just,
Right.
are you guys
think it's a
okay
good
with
idea.
pat downs? with someone possibly of a different gender. Pat downs. Mr. McCraw, would you like to speak to this? I'm sure you. Oh, you can say where possible. That's an idea. When possible. When possible. Do you have any input on that, whether we should or shouldn't? Or
I think it should say when possible,
possible.
because there's certain instances when you may not have someone of the same gender
Okay.
in cases. So
Okay. I like that. When possible. Are you guys okay with that?
Yes.
Okay. Well, that completes all the 4 policies for second review.
No, one more, 410.
Oh, I checked it out. Okay, let's do 4-10, law enforcement involvement on campus.
This again is the same. What came before you all went to the board, and we've received no recommended changes since at the policy committee. You all recommended that we fold the administrative guideline into the actual policy, and I've done that.
Great.
We would again ask for this go to the board for approval at the May meeting.
Okay. If everybody is good with that, I will now accept the motion.
I move that we send policy 4-3, 4-3C, 4-9, and 4-10 to the full board for approval.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay,
Awesome.
they'll be sent to the May meeting. Okay, that brings us to policies for first review, and we'll start with policy 4-8, child abuse reports and investigations.
Okay.
Lots of changes.
Yes, and these, we had finished up chapter 4 at the last meeting, and we're moving into chapter 5 until a change came down, which required us to revise policy 4-8. And it is a legal change that has added a second reporting requirement for schools, which expanded the types of things that need to be reported, and also expanded the relationship between the student and the alleged
Agencies.
perpetrator. Yeah. Previously, DSS was abuse, neglect, etc., and it had to be by a caretaker. The new one includes trafficking, etc., and also deals regardless of the relationship. Doesn't just have to be a caretaker. And so there are 2 different reporting mechanisms. So we have tried to clarify the reporting mechanisms, the requirements, and the 2 different agencies that they have to deal with. And that's what this policy. So it's all based on legal changes.
And did you get a lot of those recommendations from the North Carolina School Board Association, or where did you get a lot of that?
That was a lot of where I took some of the language from. I have restructured it because they went back and forth between DSS and DHHS, and it was a very confusing way they wrote the policy. So I tried to streamline it.
Okay.
Most districts don't have adopted policies yet because this is so new,
Okay.
which is why we had a proposed policy come down from the School Boards Association, and that's where I took a lot of it, and then also from the statutes.
Thank you for doing that. Any questions or comments, feedback?
Not on 4-8.
Okay, then we will move on to policy 4-13, school assignment.
Okay, this one is before you because of some requests that I had from board members to clarify, and we also made some revisions while I was doing it.
School performance.
School performance
yes.
office, I tried to catch all of those. Because we also had the administrative guideline that we talked about last meeting on special program schools.
So a couple things. School choice is a transfer, so then it will apply that the students have to be, their attendance policy, their tardy policy, everything like that will apply, correct?
Yes, if that we can, it can be interpreted that way. And what I will do, just to make sure it's clear, as I just was thinking about it, if you look at page 2 of 9, where it lists the transfers, school choice is not there. I'm going to add that as a bullet so that there's no confusion that that is actually a transfer as opposed to an assignment.
What is that under again?
If you look at page 2, there's
Under
a
student
list of student
transfer. Keep going.
transfers.
No, down. No, other way. Up. Keep going. Right there.
Okay.
She'll add school choice. Okay, on page 3, the second bullet that you added, sibling transfers for middle and high school students remain in effect until, can you just please add high school graduation? And I know that graduation is high school
Okay.
graduation, but there appears to be some
I'm sorry, sure.
confusion on it, that it's not middle school promotion, but rather high school
Okay.
graduation. So I would appreciate that.
Absolutely.
The other question that I had is on page 7 of 9, the capacity thing. Once a school reaches 95% capacity level or level as determined by the superintendent, no transfers will be approved by administrations. So sibling is not counted in this because it's not an annual transfer. It's just right.
Yep.
Would you agree with that?
Sure.
But can we
Absolutely.
add that this accepts out employee children? Because that's not what we meant to do when we did that, when we had that.
Yep.
Okay. And I know that we currently do it, but I don't want anybody to read the policy and wonder why it says that.
So going back to Kathy's first question about discipline, tardies, and attendance, do we want to add any language here to make sure that parents understand that they could lose that privilege?
It's in here. Right? Isn't it?
It is.
No, I was focusing on the
Sorry.
red letters.
Whose behavior or attendance, including full and partial day absences, is later judged by the principal to be unacceptable, will have his or her transfer revoked.
Okay.
I think you should add tardies to it.
Yeah, I definitely think we should. I mean, because I'm not sure that principals.
We had a discussion about whether or not that the choice is a transfer or a, what was the other word? Assignment. So now that we say it's a transfer and it's in here as a transfer, all of this applies.
Okay. I definitely want to add tardies.
Okay.
And just, if you could please, at the next principals meeting, just let them know that, attendance, discipline, and tardies, or something they need to be cognizant of, with transfers and school choice.
And I just want to clarify, there is already the language, including full and partial day absences. So tardy would be a partial day absence, but you want it even clearer?
Yeah,
Sure.
let's be clearer.
Is discipline in here?
It says a student who's grant transfer, whose behavior.
Oh, behavior, yes, thank you. That's what I thought, and then I
Yep.
couldn't find it.
And since school choice is so new, let's just make sure that principals know they do have that ability to manage, because school choice is an agreement that the parent can choose to go to that school, send their child to that school if they provide transportation. So if there's excessive absences or tardies, then maybe that school choice is not beneficial for the student.
Yeah. Absolutely. I'm going to make one more change. If you'll look at page 7 of 9, it says students may apply for admission through lottery. I'm going to put for a transfer. That way it's clear that it's a transfer under choice as well.
Okay.
That makes
perfect.
sense?
Yep,
Okay.
it does. Thank you. Any more comments or questions about school assignment?
Nope.
If not, we'll move to policy 5-4, interscholastic sports.
Okay. This is part of our regular review. And when we were pulling things up from the School Board Association proposed policies from other districts, we added some things to make it clear. This policy we've added extracurricular activities and interscholastic activity athletics because the policy deals with both, and the first sentence even says that, but it wasn't clear to anybody, especially our parents, that this applied to extracurriculars as well. So we've added language about extracurriculars so that it was clear and there's one place for all of these kinds of activities.
I had a quick question. In the red letters, it says 85% students must have a daily attendance of 85%. Where did the 85% come from? Is that a North Carolina High School Athletic Association target?
It is.
Okay.
It's a
I
requirement.
assumed it was. I just wanted to make sure. And then the next paragraph where it says appeals can be made by parents or students who believe that a student has been aggrieved by a decision. Now, we don't do appeals for clubs or sports, so I just wanted to talk more about just the language here.
And I had a little question around that too, up in the red as well, where it says it's a right and it may be reserved for students. And then further down, it says athletics may be restricted if students don't perform at these 4 categories. But I mean, are we leaving that open for, or does it need to be more like student will be restricted if, I just think that is a broad, what are we saying?
Well, I think that
It goes to the first paragraph of the last paragraph of that, where school administrators choosing to exercise the authority. They don't have to.
Then why do we have the policy?
It makes it very subjective.
they have to restrict them for athletics under certain criteria.
Right.
So if they don't meet the High School Athletic Association eligibility guidelines. However, for extracurriculars, it may be a club that a student who, a special ed student who doesn't meet those criteria would be eligible for certain. And so the principal would not be required to eliminate that student. Even for athletics, even though the High School Athletic Association sets that criteria, there's certain circumstances where EC kids, et cetera, are authorized to play. And so if we said that they must take those out, then you have a problem under the law, because there are criteria with which the principal is authorized to waive that.
But if it's not an EC student or some exception, then the principal really
Should.
doesn't have discretion.
Yeah.
They should,
For athletics, absolutely.
definitely.
And there may be a club where a student, for example, a CTE related club, where a student who doesn't have as high of an average, but it's important for that student for other reasons to be a part of that activity, the principal would waive those kinds of criteria. So there are certain situations where you want the principal to be able to use that authority. The reason for the appeals piece is that if we believe that there's a violation of policy, they are entitled to come before you. You don't hear them in general, but there is law which says if we believe there's a violation of law or policy, they are required to be heard by the board.
We just haven't had any.
We just haven't had any of those.
I think
We can take that language out if you think it creates a situation.
considering some examples that we had the school year,
Mhm.
if I were standing in those students or parents' shoes and I read this, I would be very concerned why I was not allowed to have an appeal. So is there a better way to define it, or just to clear it up on why we in 99% of the time do not hear?
Maybe, I mean, it's your call, but maybe where it says appeals,
Mm-hmm,
you could clarify it. We do have situations where appeals are made to the administration,
mm-hmm,
and we hear those,
mm-hmm.
but not necessarily an appeal to the board.
That goes to the board.
So if you wanted to clarify, they have the right to
Administration.
appeal to the, I don't know, Michelle, we can do that, but
That's not a bad
we do that.
idea.
But I guess I don't mind this because 1-18 sets forth how they can appeal and to whom they
Mhm.
can appeal.
Mhm.
So they would have, I hear what you're
Mhm.
saying, but I think 1-18 covers its instances in which you can appeal administratively to the superintendent and to the Board of Education.
Yeah. We just have to hope that they take the time to go read policy 1-18.
That's where they would be directed.
Yeah. Because again, if I was in the parent's shoes and I read this, I would be very disappointed that the board did not hear my student's appeal.
Or you could just say, you know, the grievance procedure is provided in policy 1-18 appeals period.
Okay.
Okay. Because this makes it sound like they're allowed to have an appeal.
They do get an appeal to the admin, to the administrative level.
It doesn't say
Which
to
goes
the
back
board.
to Dr. Houlihan's recommendation, you know, to say to administration. And please refer to policy 1-18.
I like the language that just says the grievance procedures are provided in policy 118,
Oh.
period.
Okay. Okay. I'm good with that. Okay. If there aren't any other questions, we can move on to policy 5-8, parent involvement.
This, again, is part of the regular review, and in pulling out some other districts' policies, et cetera, we made some revisions.
I have a couple
Proposed.
questions. The grade earned by the school on the most recent annual report card issued for it by the State Board of Education, if the grade was a D or F, is that state law that we only have to tell them what the grade of the school is if it's a D or F school?
Yeah, that's state board policy.
Do we tell them if it's an A, B, or C, or D school, or C school?
Seems like I get them in my
We do,
students'
right?
packet
You
every
should.
year.
At the beginning of the year, whenever it's released, we
Yeah.
do
We
ask
send
them
it
to put them
home,
on
right?
their website, just like their North Carolina
Regardless of
report
what
card.
the grade
Right.
is.
Regardless, yeah, as a best practice.
Okay.
Okay.
It refers to, there's a bullet that says for students in grades K through 2, written notification of students' reading progress 3 times per year following each benchmark. Are we still doing 3 times a year? Is that something that changed under our testing guidelines? I can't remember.
We need to go back and look at that, Michelle, because read to achieve did change for this year,
Right.
and that the requirement is now a beginning and end of year.
That's what I
I
thought.
think some teachers and schools are doing a mid-year, but maybe not as part of the accountability system, just as a formative. But
So
we might
maybe
wanna
just
go
2
back
times per year.
and clarify that to be 2
Okay.
times.
Okay. And then in the second to last bullet on that page, 2 of 5, you reference Boy Scouts, but not Girl Scouts.
No, because they have a federal law protection that Girl Scouts don't, and that's the language out of the statute. I know, it's
Oh.
crazy.
Seriously?
I was curious why that was singled out.
Yeah, that's strictly out of law.
Oh, wow. Interesting. Okay.
That's all I had.
I don't know why
Okay.
it's like that, but it is.
If there are no other questions or comments, that brings us to policy 5-14, goals and objectives of the educational program.
Again, these are just changes in part of the regular review that that have happened since the last time the board did review this policy.
I have no comments on
I
that
do
one.
not have any. Okay. And that brings us to the last one, policy 5-16, school trips.
I have a couple. 1, 2, 3, fourth paragraph down. Second sentence, student behavior prior to the trip when resulting in a suspension may impact whether a student can attend. I thought our rule was if they've been suspended, there's no field trip.
The rule, as I understand it, it depends on the timing. Was it 6 months before the trip? Was it at the time of the trip? Was it before I signed the contract? Was it after I signed the contract? Those kinds of things. And that's just always been the way the policy's been written.
Then the next sentence, in order to consider discipline for trip participation, the student and parent must have signed an agreement indicating such prior to the behavior being considered, and all fees paid must be refunded. So we refund fees even if their kid gets in trouble?
That's the way the policy's been.
Because
That's crazy.
every contract I've ever had, and I've had 2 students go through, so I think I've been in the system many, I'm going to say 13 or 14 years at this point. It's always been my understanding that if a student did something that they were not allowed to go on the field trip, that they forfeited their money.
This is the language that was recommended to me by
So
staff.
if a school is having parents
I would,
Under that contract, does that mean we're not following policy? If a school's saying you lose, don't get your money back?
Well, that wasn't written in policy before. That's in red.
so then
that's-
every school has to change their stuff on
Contract.
field trips because it says you don't get your money back.
yeah, this is,
Okay, and I would love to see something in there that says after the, because we mentioned the signed agreement. After the agreement's signed, if they get suspended, no field trip. I don't know how you guys feel about it, but I feel that we should do that.
Do you want to say, like ISS and OSS or just all suspensions?
I was thinking out of school suspensions.
So a 1 day in-school suspension, you would not? So then we would have to define it with what type of suspension?
Out of school suspension.
OSS.
I don't know unless you disagree with that. I think OSS is a little more, has more bite to it, severe. Yeah. I mean, they can get ISS if they're lesser, right?
And
Lesser.
again, I know a lot of schools will.
Do you just like that?
my only concern is that you're going to have students, and I hate to use the EC example again, who are suspended for behavior which is related to their disability.
Right.
And so then you're going to say they can't go on a field trip when what by law we've said it's part of their
It was a
disability.
manifest.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I know many of our schools will put something at the top of each student's desk. Let's say, I'm going to make up something here. Washington, okay? Well, let's say there's an 8th grade field trip and they're going to Washington, D.C. So they take Washington to each student's desk. And every time they talk out of turn or have some extremely minor infraction, they have to cross off a letter. So, yeah. And so, so if they cross out all of their letters, they are not allowed to go on the school trip and they forfeit their money.
That's crazy.
So, is there any way to correct that in this updated policy that teachers and schools cannot, that it's only going to be limited to out of school suspensions, that a student would not be able to go?
Well, if we say OSS,
Mm-hmm.
right now the policy is pretty broad, which is part of why the recommendation came from the Office of School Performance Directors to take, or the school performance directors to pull that out.
Okay.
Because right now it says, regardless of whether a suspension is imposed, so it would allow those crossing off.
Yes.
This would then now say that only behavior that's considered to
Is out of school
is
suspension.
out of school suspension. So that would take that option away.
And that takes-
So assuming that this goes through,
Mhm.
schools will no longer be able to tape something to a desk where all their peers can see, oh, Johnny has 3 letters crossed off. Oh, Johnny only has 1 letter left. I mean, that's a lot of pressure. So this would no longer be allowed in Union County Public Schools.
Well, and I would say that that was inappropriate probably
to begin with.
because it's out there with confidential kind of my misbehavior.
Okay.
But yeah, we'll clarify that with
Thank you.
with the principals as well.
Okay.
Awesome.
Okay. On the next page, second paragraph, non-sponsored trips may not be promoted or advertised in the schools.
Correct.
I'm just telling you, that's not happening. And that's, how are kids supposed to find out? I get it. At high school especially has non-school sponsored trips, but it is advertised. And it's advertised as a not sponsored school event. But it is advertised.
The way that you know, as it says, it could only be displayed on the community bulletin board. That way it would still be in the school. And that's not clear in policy, which is why it's in the red. The problem we have is that if I, as a teacher, I have a captive audience in my class and I'm going to sponsor personally a trip to France, and then I'm usually making money on that because I'm getting my room free, my travel free, that is it's not fair, but it also precludes us from then disclaiming liability should something happen on that trip. So if
But
we say that,
okay, I get
Yeah.
that. But practically, how would students find out that they don't look at bulletin boards in high school? I mean, they're just not going to. So how is it supposed to get out there then? And I'm not saying that it's a great thing to have these trips, but I think they happen at every school. So how do you get that out then?
I think what the result is maybe, or partial of this, is that the school, then I'm going to, as the teacher, instead of doing my private sponsored trip, is I'm going to go to the school and say, can I, as a school sponsored trip, do this? And then the students would still have the opportunity, but it would be in a sanctioned way, more protected, all of those other things.
Okay. I guess then I don't know what the difference between a school sponsored one. So if a teacher over the summer takes a group of kids to France, let's say, could that possibly be a school sponsored trip?
Yes.
And it's just, they have to go through certain things in order to do it. Then I'm fine. Okay. Next.
Okay.
Okay. We would ask that all of these policies go for review by the board at the May meeting.
I move that policy 4-8, 413, 5-4, 5-8, 5-14, and 5-16 as amended today go to the full board for first review.
Second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Okay.
Okay,
That's-
then we have administrative guidelines for review. We'll begin with 2-4, grants and funding for special projects, crowd or fund sourcing.
Explain that.
Okay.
That's my first question.
Yeah, we've had an administrative guideline, and this could all be in red because I scratched it and started from the beginning.
So this
With
is new.
it is, we've had one in place, but this is so revised that we decided just to.
Okay.
And this was developed in part with a committee that was had Ms. Stallbert and Ms. McLam and some folks from finance involved in it, as well as Mr. Parker. We have had staff who are looking for different
Flexible
things.
seating.
That's a good example.
Books,
And they go through Donors Choose or
which they go through a whole bunch
GoFundMe.
of stuff. Yes.
Also, and we've had some things in place, but apparently people did not know that and weren't following that. So we have, through the strategic plan and one of Ms. Stallbert's initiatives, designated Living Tree as the approved crowd fund sourcing Donors Choose GoFundMe type platform for the district.
For all teachers and staff.
Exactly.
Okay. Question.
Yep.
Let's say a teacher puts up a Living Tree site to get flexible seating. Who owns the flexible seating for the classroom?
It says in here that it's owned by the district and not the teacher.
Always.
Always. The very last
Books.
paragraph says all purchases made pursuant to the project will be the subject to inventory procedure of the district, become the property of the board, not the individual staff member or even the school.
Okay.
So it's yours.
So I have a question. You mentioned that Ms. Stallbert was on this committee, Ms. McLam, Mr. Parker.
Yep.
Anyone from facilities?
We got feedback from facilities, but I don't know if there's anybody that sat around with us.
The only reason I ask is because I would hate for a teacher or a school to do a Living Tree for flexible seating if facilities already has that on the year one CIP and we're already preparing to furnish that school.
And
But the teacher just doesn't want to wait for it.
So Living Tree is not just for those types of things. This is the tool that we're using to connect partners with schools on a wide variety of projects. The process calls that the principal has to give final approval. Teachers are not putting up their own campaigns without a process that goes forth. So a campaign should never go up without a principal giving, they have to do final approval.
And I think that's kind of always been our policy.
Correct.
The principal
Yeah,
needs to have
but
knowledge.
Not really followed though.
Right, that because they were going to do GoFundMe's and all those others, principals don't have to approve that because that's their own they're using their own personal pages.
So I agree with all of that.
Mm-hmm.
But, again, was anyone from facilities included on this committee?
Well, and it does
Maybe
say
we-
in the policy that the director of facilities has to approve
Right.
everything.
Okay.
Yes.
This facilities does donation is CTO and yeah.
Okay.
So they,
So I don't know if you want to review this or update our principals, because just make sure that the principals communicate with whichever appropriate department, whether it's technology or, facilities, to make sure that that's not already in the works and being discussed.
correct.
Correct.
And Mr. Strickland did receive this prior to
Right.
today for him to review.
And so keep in mind that any changes made to the school, physical changes, we would require a building modification form, and that always comes through us. So they're not out there doing things that we don't know about.
But not furniture and stuff.
Not furniture. They may have some furniture requests
Okay.
that they buy on their own. Now, if they come to us and ask us to fund it, we would certainly vet it out and make sure it's appropriate.
But if, I guess the question is, so let's use flexible seating. It's a big thing right now. Do we have any, do we have any criteria around what they can ask for? No.
If they buy it with school money, that's one thing. But we have bought some in the past, and we vet that out through our
Okay.
purchasing
Okay.
folks. So we have a process that we go through.
Okay. So,
It does. It all comes through
okay, good.
us. Yeah.
It does. Good. So PTOs, PTSOs, booster clubs are exempt from this. They can use their own things.
Correct.
But student clubs may not use crowd or fund sourcing. Can the faculty advisor use it on behalf of the club?
Yeah, yes. And right now we're starting small.
So you're saying students can't use it, and I think is what you're saying, but the club's faculty advisor could put something out.
Right.
Because in
And
the other,
are you saying that the PTOs and the booster clubs can use any crowdfunding?
Yes, because we
Yes.
can't have any, they are a separate legal entity, so we can't tell them what they can do and what they can't do.
Okay.
pretty
Um,
tip. So
when it comes to the clubs, we wanted to limit that because that's a lot of, in the initial, there are a lot of clubs in those schools, and keeping some of this separate so that it goes just to that club is going to be a little more challenging.
because the school system's getting the money and then
Yes,
Hold on.
it's all funneling through the central office. We have a separate account that we've done
Okay.
for this specifically.
What about,
And then we will distribute it to those schools.
okay, what about high school sports?
We talked about that.
In conversation, what we found is that a lot of these clubs and athletic fundraising efforts that they do, they want the students to actually go out into the community.
Right.
So this would
It doesn't
kind
mention
of-
athletics in here though.
right, because we're
We're
going to
allowing
let
it.
them continue doing what they are doing until we can try to do something
I mean,
different.
most of those.
But we're saying clubs can't do it, but the athletics can do it?
Well,
I'm confused.
no, because either a sport is either a booster club funded sport
Or it's ours.
or clubs. Yeah, or it's ours. And so,
Well, no, there's three kinds, right? There's a club, there's
club.
boosters, and there's high school sports, which are our sports,
right,
right? Or
right.
do I not understand sports?
Most of them
would
are,
be easy.
most of them have booster clubs associated with them. We do have some schools that don't use theirs as much, but we had some that don't have PTOs, but we couldn't find any that didn't have a booster.
Every athletic, baseball, football, basketball, they always do fundraisers and they're through what do we call it? Crowd/fund sourcing. So are we saying we're not going to let them do that? Or what are we saying?
No,
I'm
they're going to
saying-
still use. They're going to still use their.
So we're letting high school sports do this, but we're not allowing clubs, high school clubs to do it.
That was my.
Oh, sorry. I don't understand the distinction.
I think once we get this rolling and can kind of see how we're going to be able to manage this, we'll
Okay.
be able to.
So maybe the first year you're just doing,
We're
you're
trying-
letting sports
Because a lot of this is going to be a lot of additional accounting for each school
Mhm.
and trying to keep until we start getting some of the reports from Living Tree and sort of see what we're getting.
Okay.
It's all going to go into one account.
So
And
this is a pilot to see, and then maybe
right, if
next
we
year
can
we can
limit
add
it
more
so
into
we
it.
know
Okay.
exactly where it's going, then we can kind of distinguish it as we move forward.
So if people ask us about student clubs, we could say that this year they're not going to be able to do it, but their faculty advisor could do it for them. But we'll see where we go after that.
Well, Michelle, I thought we weren't doing clubs at all. Does it say the faculty advisor?
No, I that may be my mistake. I thought that's what we had agreed upon.
So no clubs can raise money at all?
We're just going to have to see. I think it's going to be on an individual basis. We're just going to have to see how this goes as we get started. This gets us started.
Clubs can't.
Well, they can collect
each have their
money and
own
stuff. They just
account.
can't do it on the
Living
internet.
Tree.
This is only about the district supported platform, Living Tree.
But no, it says they
Clubs.
cannot use any.
My interpretation is that, or what I believe was intended, is that we don't want to limit any club or sports team from not raising money.
So it
Of course
says
they should be
student
doing
clubs
that.
may not use crowdfunding sourcing. It says it, may not. I'm just trying to understand.
Correct. There were some examples that this was the intention of this from the very beginning was to partner businesses and other folks with schools to help with projects. So right now we're piloting, Parkwood had a project around supplies. Also Weddington had a project around, it was actual flexible seating for their media center. But we had to look at other things that were also out of control in some of our opinion when it was regards to raising money and things like that. So that's how we got into this space. We do need to maybe go back and look at that piece for clubs. But when we talked about it, it was in the realm of trying to keep things organized and keep it where we could actually track some of the things that are going on. So we're happy to go back and look at it and kind of weigh the pros and cons. But that was feedback from our finance department as well, as far as some
Okay.
of the clubs and how they're raising money.
So marching band at the high school, I assume that's a club, but I'm not really sure what it would even count as at this
Co-
point.
they have a
curricular.
booster.
So
It's also co-curricular because
they have a
it's-
booster.
Right.
It's
Okay.
required. To
And
be
that was
school
kind
ed.
of the line, Kathy, on some of these. And it wasn't to take away any, it was more so to streamline and help us keep better tracking of some things.
So let me just clarify here. This is a recommendation
Mhm.
if they want to use crowdfunding.
Correct.
This would not would this prevent a club from doing a car wash?
Not at
or-
all.
No, ma'am.
Okay,
Not
so
at
this
all.
is only a definition around crowdfunding.
Right. We're
Correct.
not trying to take away any of the other strategies on how they fundraise.
Because athletics was one of the things that came up, and they use this. I can't remember the name of it because we're standing
Yeah, I
here talking
can't.
about it.
That's okay.
And I can't think of it. And they use that platform and are very successful with that. So we didn't want to prevent them from continuing in that,
We couldn't
but
choose that one for everything?
Why was the Living,
it's specific for
For
athletics.
sports.
Yes.
It's
why
also
was the
more
Living Tree
expensive.
platform selected?
I'm sorry.
Why was the Living Tree platform selected?
Yeah.
And can you speak to maybe what their holdback is on this?
for
My
years-
team
For
works.
years, we were
My
searching.
Teamworks, is that what they use? My team works.
No, that's not the name of it, but
That's what some.
we were searching for a few years for a platform that could do all of this. Living Tree, you could put up a campaign. The cost was cheaper than GoFundMe or what was the other one? Donors Choose. Also, it allows for volunteer management. It allows for contacts to be taken into one place. So our thinking around that was we don't have a central management system for all of our partners or contact information or anything for the district. And this was a platform that could provide that.
So what is their percentage that they retain? Their fee?
What was it? I don't know off the top of my head. I could look at it, but I do know, I remember Gloria saying it was cheaper than,
GoFundMe.
yeah. And it's a way that we could manage things. With GoFundMe and those others, principals have no idea what their teachers are out there asking for. With this, it is a process where within the schoolhouse, it has to go through an approval process.
One last question. Do you know if Living Tree is bonded with these funds?
I don't know, we
I mean, if
signed a
they're holding on
contract with
$20,000
them.
of our money and say they would go out, will we be guaranteed to get those funds?
How often do they transfer the money? So some companies transfer them nightly, some do it when you ask them to.
I want to say it was daily. I think it comes straight into our, and it's
Okay.
through, they have a partnership somehow with PayPal.
Well, PayPal, you have to go in and ask it to transfer.
This,
But
I think-
what's the Square D and stuff? They automatically every night transfer money.
I believe it's going to be every day.
That
And
makes
we're
me
going to
feel
do a
better.
transfer to the schools, like probably weekly.
Okay, that's fine.
And
But like PayPal, even though PayPal is a great company, they hold your money and you have to physically go into your account and say it to be moved over. So I understand your thing. As long as it's being transferred every night, like Square D does, I get that.
Yeah, it's not that process.
Okay. I'm still concerned about clubs though. I'm going to be honest with you.
Do we want,
Ki-
do we
I
want
guess-
to bring this back next month?
No,
for
I guess
consideration?
I would ask you to bring this up at the principals meeting and see what they feel. I mean, I can tell you, I can know a couple clubs that I know that uses online funding, but maybe the principals are good with that they don't like that idea. And this way it gives them.
Well, and I think we're going to continue to open up once because there's a way to put
And I
an
agree.
account code in there. And so I feel like that will be an option. It's just getting it started.
I'm good with this going to the full board. If you, like we've done before, where you talk to the principals unless they have some big objection to the fact that the students can't raise money online.
So I would make that part of the motion.
Okay. So, well, this is an administrative guideline.
Correct.
So but we still make a motion to send it to the full board, right?
You can make a motion to
Okay.
yes, correct.
Okay, I move to send 2-4 to the full board after the Dr. Houlihan and Ms. Morris have an opportunity to speak to the principals about how they feel about the student club language.
And I would maybe add to that as far as some of the questions we asked, how often the transfers are taking place, the
Yep.
bonding, the percent.
Great.
Agree.
And just so you know, I was trying to find some more information as we were sitting here. Living Tree, and one of the reasons I think, and I don't know, Ms. Stauber mentioned, it is specifically designed for K-12 school systems.
Good to know.
It's not a crowdsourcing in general. It's a school system generated one.
So, Mr. Price, was that a second?
An amendment with a second, and it's a friendly amendment. I'm good with it.
Yes.
Okay. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, that brings us to administrative guidelines for Code of Conduct 4-3.
Okay. Now, I know that this is an incredible amount
Yes.
to read. So I'm going to kind of review what the major revisions are so that you can, the substantive revisions. The first one of substance is on page 2 of 22. Some of them are just clarifications, but we had a request for clarification about parent notification. And so there's that paragraph there that talks about when parents should be, how and when, and the timing in relation to the event, parents should be notified. Specifically, if the discipline or the strategy being imposed is outside the school day, OSS, it pulls me out of the environment, ISS, OSS, or after school detention, stay school, that parents are notified prior to the imposition of the consequence. So if I'm staying after school detention, my mom and dad should know before I'm supposed to be home, you know, so that I don't wonder where is my child. Or if they have to do OSS, those kinds of things.
I mean, basically, they try to contact the parents right away.
Correct.
Right?
It's
I mean,
not always the case. And so we're making sure that
Okay.
principals understand that that has to happen.
And I think it's important to make a concerted effort to contact both parents in the event that both parents don't live under the same roof with the child. Because I know in appeals, we've had examples where the parent who had custody or that the parent that the student lived with did not know, but the parent that the student no longer lived with did know.
Mhm.
And so I think there have been some examples, and maybe it was just a weakness on that parent's part, which is highly likely. But so do we try to just make sure we contact one parent and then stop, or do we try to make sure we contact both parents?
Generally, the practice is they contact the custodial parent.
Okay.
And then generally in a custody agreement, the court puts the burden on the parent who has custody of letting the other person know. It's hard sometimes to make sure they contact both parents, but the requirement is the custodial parent.
The particular appeal I'm remembering, and it was a recent appeal, the custodial parent said that they were not aware of all of the in-school and out-of-school infractions that brought them to the appeal. But the parent that did not have custody of the child was the one that the school was able to contact and receive the phone call. And so they knew, but the custodial parent said that they did not know.
Yeah, and that will happen infrequently, but if the parent has not given us updated contact information, those kinds of things, they will then go down the list.
Right.
Because they want to reach somebody. And then this also requires that if I'm in a partial day ISS, a conference, the parent should be notified as soon as possible. Sometimes it can't be at the immediate time of the event, but within 24 hours. So that's the first major substantive change. I'm sorry, I have a list of them, so I'm trying to keep myself organized. All right. The next one is we added some definitions of restorative justice on the next page. That was part of a resolution.
Yep.
The same thing with the mitigating factors that's on page 5 of 22.
I have a question on
Sure.
this. So the 10th one, what action the student and or the student's parents have taken since the offense occurred? Like mitigating what are we talking about?
One example of that might be, and Jared's been involved in those, Mr. McGraw, when we perhaps believe a child is under the influence and the parent then takes a child for a drug test.
Okay.
And it proves they were not under the influence.
Okay.
We may go back and consider that as a change, something like that. That's an example.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So it's
go ahead.
Okay, it's okay. There's a paragraph without a change that begins, principals shall consider the student's intent, disciplinary and academic history, potential benefits of alternative suspension, and any other mitigating or aggravating factor when considering a recommendation for long-term. Why did I have that question? Doesn't that repeat everything you just added? In the red, kind of?
Kind of. Yeah, we can take that out.
Intent, disciplinary, academic, aggravating factors. I think we have it all up there.
Is it important to keep policy 4-1 attendance for reference, or no? Just delete the whole thing? Or should
we could delete the first
sentence? No, I'm only
sentence
talking about the first sentence. Sorry, just the first sentence. No, I'm sorry, just the first sentence. I think it's just repetition.
Okay, gotcha.
Of what I like that you laid them out in numerical rather in this sentence. So I like the above better.
Or move it up. Okay, I'll play around.
Yeah.
Another major one.
Page 7, I have a question.
Sure, go ahead.
So about threats directed toward any other student, staff member, or other adult, we've now added depending upon the severity of the threat.
For the long term.
So in the past, and maybe this is not the right example, so tell me if I'm wrong. Let's say that a student physically threatened a teacher. Usually their punishment is pretty severe because it's a member of staff in the school. Now we're determining the severity of it.
I think some of them goes to if I say something like, I'm going to kick your blank versus I'm going to threat, versus a significant threat. So it just kind of clarifies what we've been doing already. That it clarifies the judgment of the principal.
Okay.
The one thing before at page 6 of 22 that I wanted to report the change it used to be that that assaults resulting in injury must be reported to the principal. We changed it to all assaults have to be reported to the principal.
Okay,
The bullying rule,
I like that. That's just adding where you
we
can
added
go
the
in. I
school
like that.
counselor, and then at
App.
Miss Merrill's request, we added the app.
I like that.
Um,
Okay.
Yeah.
Page 10, electronic device.
Yep.
High school. That's funny. I put it, I mean, they all have them.
Correct.
They all use them.
Correct.
So we have a policy that says they can't.
No, this just says that if they have them, the recording and listening capabilities have to be turned off.
It says students during will not use cellular phones or electronic during instructional time except pursuant to an authorized purpose or an instructional tool. May use them during non-instruct. That's fine.
Yeah, the only change we made is that they have to have those recording and listening capabilities turned
Okay.
off.
Just so we know that they all use them all day long.
Oh yeah, I'm wearing mine right now.
Is Angel Sense something that our students are
Yeah,
actively using?
it's it's like a tracking watch type. It's not really a watch, but it's a tracking device that students can wear.
Mhm. Yeah.
But it also has a recording and listening device so that folks outside of the building could listen in. And
So my question is, if we're going to have this code for our students, do we have the same code for our teachers to not be able to have a listening device that can be listened to outside of their classroom? Do we have the same language where our teachers can't do this inside, or a substitute or a TA or?
I can talk to Dr. Barnes about that.
Okay.
Because I think with if there's a 504 or an IP in the classroom, or I don't think adults should be able to do this either for
Okay.
student privacy.
So at the bottom of page 10,
Mhm.
firearms and destructive devices. So we reference the North Carolina statutes. There's a federal law, right? Safe school
The
laws,
gun-free school zones. That yeah.
which basically says that if a kid brings a weapon to school, it's 365 days, right? I thought
Correct.
that the federal law is like black and white. It says you bring it, you're done. Why don't we reference that?
Well, I don't know that we don't. We generally reference that at the end.
We do.
Oh, we do. I mean, it should
don't
be
know.
should be in the legal references. Oh, they don't have it in this this
Yeah.
guidelines.
Oh,
Okay.
no, you're right.
Yeah, I can add that.
I think that'd be great.
And it does say that the suspension cease device shall be imposed.
Perfect.
Over the counter.
Yeah,
CBT oil.
we added
Okay.
CBT oil and essential oils because we're having some obviously some,
Yes.
I think the next major one is the electronic cigarettes and the
Yes.
use of Juuls
Yay.
and similar. That's on page 14. We clarified that an electronic cigarette does include a Juul. We have increased
And a vape too, right?
and a vape. I can add that too. We have increased the potential days of suspension because that was a concern. And then we did put a separate consequence for students who are engaged in using those products actually in the classroom.
We know that most of this is happening in the bathroom.
Correct.
Um,
Well, yeah.
Can we just say on school premises and
Well-
not limit it to the classroom?
Well, there's both.
There is both. We've just given a
Okay.
heightened consequence if you're actually doing it in the
The
classroom.
classroom.
Shouldn't there be a heightened consequence if they're doing it in the bathroom? I mean, because other students are trying to use the bathroom.
It's up to the board. We have the 1 to 5 if they're using it at all, and then a 6 if they're using it in the classroom.
I say 6 if they're using it anywhere in the building.
So the first offense, we all agree applies to both, right? 1 to 5 days suspension. Secondary, what's the secondary?
That's secondary.
To the first offense?
No,
Or
secondary level.
element?
Yeah,
Okay.
like elementary and secondary, and then that's just for
Okay.
secondary. We've not really had that as a situation.
I mean, it's becoming a very serious problem in our middle schools and high schools that students don't want to go to the bathroom because of the odor, the many different odors and flavors that are floating around inside the bathroom.
It's become a big epidemic in our school system, the juuling and the vaping. We have to do something to try to.
So I would like to take out class and, I mean, because I don't want.
In school.
Yeah, in school.
School premise.
The other part of this is we're also changing the consequence on the first offense.
Correct.
The
Yes,
prior version
to
said
1 to 5.
Now it's 1 to 5. So I think that this, no matter where it happens on the school premises, if it's a 5-day or a 3-day or a 4-day, that's
One of the
significantly
things
more
that
severe than we currently have.
the Weddington High Forum, that was one of the things that came up, was that the first offense needed to have more bite to it than a single day. And there was a gap between the 1 day and 3 to 5 days. So is there not an ability to do 2 days or whatever? But now we've covered that. Good. Glad to
I
see
mean,
that.
because let's keep in mind, the law just recently changed on jewels. And the age requirement to purchase has gone up. And we do not have students enrolled that are 21 in our traditional schools. And so it would be illegal for students to have these on our campus because they are under the age.
Can I make a recommendation that then we change this to where it has the first and second and subsequent offenses, that would be just for possession. Then the secondary offense, where it's the 6 days, would be for use, sell, and distribute. So we'll separate it that way. And then there's the heightened consequence if I'm selling or distributing them. And then the possession alone is the 1 to 5.
I like that because possession, they're still underage. So
Right.
I would agree with that. I think that's a great recommendation.
All right. The next major change is the possession of paraphernalia. That was confusing the way it was previously included under the illegal drugs, counterfeit, blah, blah, blah. And so we've separated that and made the consequences consistent with what. The next major change is we took sexual harassment out of sexual behavior and made it a standalone rule. Seemed that didn't, while it has
like
sexual in it, it's not really the same thing.
I like the, on page 17, that we added students will not engage in consensual sex on school property. You wouldn't think you'd have to spell that out, but clearly it's necessary.
That's good.
The next one is on page 19 of 20, and it deals with theft and robbery. It didn't seem to make sense, the consequences, that it was all the same, whether it was just taking it or whether I took it by threat of force or violence.
Okay.
So we clarified that and separated theft and robbery. And then that's really the substantive changes.
They look good.
How would it apply if we're talking about theft is taking someone's property and destruction?
I think that falls under vandalism.
Vandalism.
Yeah,
okay.
Correct.
Okay,
Robbery is the heightened thing.
Correct.
If you take it by force.
gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, vandalism is
Vandalism.
students will not vandalize property owned by system, school staff, or other students. That's the very last
Okay.
rule.
Perfect.
I move that we send this to the full board with the amendments we talked about.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, and that brings us to administrative guidelines for review for 5-4, concussion and head injury.
Yes, this one, there's no
No
substantive
substantive.
changes. That's just fixing some, but because you wanted me to, when we went over
Right.
policy to bring the administrative guideline, this one doesn't require anything to happened with the board. I just wanted y'all to have it since
Great.
we did 5-4.
I move that we send administrative guideline 5-4 to the full board.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so action items to be sent to the full board at the May meeting would be all of the policies for approval
Mm-hmm.
would be 4-3, 4-3C, 4-9, and 410. So that would be for approval. And for review would be all of the items listed under number 6, 4-8, all the way down through 5-16, and then the 3 administrative guidelines. Those would be for approval, I guess, the administrative guidelines.
The policy just
They're just
says the board reviews
for
them.
review.
Just review.
Yep.
Yeah, they don't actually necessarily approve them.
Okay. So we'll include that, all of the items from 6 and 7 for review. Okay. Anything else we want to send to the board?
That's all I had.
For the May meeting, I will accept a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.